Princess Lotus Flower. The story goes like this. In Jiuzhou, there was a man named Du Sheng, also known as Zhu, with the courtesy name Zhao Hui. One day, he was taking a nap during the afternoon and felt as though a person in brown short robes was standing by his bed, looking around anxiously, as if wanting to say something. Du Sheng asked who he was, and the person replied, "My lord at home would like to invite you for a visit." Du Sheng inquired, "Who is your lord?" The person said, "Just nearby." Du Sheng followed him outside. Turning a corner, they arrived at a place with pavilions and terraces stacked upon each other endlessly. They walked along winding paths, and Du Sheng felt that the countless doors and gates were unlike those in the mortal world. He saw many palace maids and court ladies coming and going, bustling around. Whenever they saw the person in brown robes, they asked, "Has Du Sheng arrived?" The reply was, "Yes, he has." After a while, a high-ranking official came out to greet them and saw Du Sheng in a respectful manner. Du Sheng said, "We haven't had much interaction before, so I haven't come to pay my respects. Today, I am deeply honored by your hospitality, and I'm somewhat puzzled." The high-ranking official laughed and said, "Our king has long heard of the generations of integrity and high reputation in your family. We admire you greatly and hope to meet you." Du Sheng was even more astonished and asked, "Who is this king?" The reply was, "Wait a moment, and you'll understand for yourself." In a little while, two court ladies arrived, holding a pair of long banners, and led Du Sheng into the palace. Passing through several gates, he saw a great king sitting on a distant hall. When the king saw Du Sheng's arrival, he descended the steps to greet him. After they had exchanged formal bows, they arranged a feast, and the banquet was lavish. As Du Sheng looked up, he saw a plaque in the hall with the characters Gifu written on it. This made Du Sheng uneasy, and he had difficulty finding the right words to say. The king said, "To be neighbors with you is a sign of our deep connection. Enjoy the feast and don't suspect or fear." Du Sheng nodded in agreement. After several rounds of drinking, the sounds of music and singing filled the hall. There were no drums or gongs, only the melodious tunes of string and woodwind instruments. When the music paused, the king turned to those around him and said, "I thought of a couplet, and I'd like you all to provide the second line." The first line is, "The talented scholar ascends Gifu Palace." As the officials were contemplating, Du Sheng immediately responded, "The gentleman loves lotus flowers." The king was delighted and said, "How strange! Lotus Flower is the pet name of my daughter, and your response is so fitting. Could it be that there's a long-standing affinity between you two? Send a message to the princess. She must come out and meet this talented scholar." After a while, the sound of tinkling ornaments grew nearer, and the scent of orchids and musk became stronger as the princess approached. She looked to be around 16 or 17, exceptionally beautiful. The king asked the princess to greet Du Sheng, saying, "This is my youngest daughter, Lotus Flower." The princess paid her respects, then returned to the inner chambers. When Du Sheng saw the princess, his heart trembled, and he sat there in a daze, lost in thought. The king raised his cup and encouraged Du Sheng to drink, but Du Sheng seemed oblivious. The king seemed to sense Du Sheng's feelings and said, "My daughter and you are well matched, but it's regrettable that you belong to different realms. What should we do?" Du Sheng seemed absent-minded, as if he hadn't heard the king's words. The person sitting next to him discreetly kicked Du Sheng and whispered, "When the king saluted you just now, didn't you see? Did you also not hear when the king spoke to you?" Du Sheng was in a daze, seemingly soulless, and felt ashamed. He stood up from his seat, saying, "I've been treated with great kindness by the king, and I've unintentionally overindulged in drink. This has been disrespectful, and I hope for your forgiveness. The king is busy with state affairs, and it's time for me to take my leave." The king also left his seat, saying, "Meeting Scholar Du today has brought me great satisfaction. Why the hasty departure? If you don't wish to stay, I won't force you. If you ever miss this place, I will send someone to invite you again." With that, he ordered an eunuch to escort Du Sheng out. On their way, the eunuch asked, "When the king said you were a good match, why didn't you say anything?" Du Sheng regretted deeply. As he walked along, he felt remorse and worry, and before he knew it, he was already back home. Du Sheng suddenly woke up, and the last traces of twilight outside the window were fading. He sat silently, recalling the events that had just transpired, vividly replaying them in his mind. After dinner, he extinguished the candles, hoping to find the dreamlike state again in the realm of the supernatural. However, the path to Hendon was elusive, and he was left only with regret and sighs. One evening, Du Sheng shared a bed with a friend. Suddenly, the palace eunuch who had previously come to escort him appeared again, relaying the king's command to invite Du Sheng into the palace. Du Sheng was elated and followed him. When Du Sheng saw the king, he hastened forward to pay his respects. The king warmly helped him up and had him sit beside him, saying, "Since we parted last time, I know you have a deep affection for my daughter. Now, I am arranging a marriage between you two. I hope you don't find this undesirable." Du Sheng immediately bowed in gratitude. The king instructed scholars and ministers to accompany Du Sheng in a feast. While they were drinking and enjoying themselves, a report came that the princess was ready. Soon, dozens of palace maids gathered around, escorting the princess. Her face was covered with a red silk veil, and she stepped lightly on the crimson carpet, supported by attendants. Du Sheng and the princess bowed to heaven and earth, symbolizing their marriage. After the ceremony, the attendants led them to the palace chambers. The bridal chamber was gentle and cool, with a sweet fragrance in the air. Du Sheng said, "With the princess by my side, I'm so joyful that I forget about death. I feared that today's encounter might be just a dream." The princess covered her mouth and laughed, saying, "Clearly, I'm right here with you. How can this be a dream?" The next morning, Du Sheng playfully applied makeup to the princess, powdering her face and drawing her eyebrows. When he was done, he used a ribbon to measure her waist and his fingers to measure her feet. The princess laughed and asked, "Is Scholar Du going mad?" Du Sheng said, "I've been deceived by dreams so many times that I'm afraid. That's why I'm taking a close look at you and memorizing everything. Even if it's a dream, I'll remember it clearly." As they were talking and laughing, a palace maid rushed in and said, "A monster has entered the palace. The king is hiding in the side hall, and disaster is imminent." Du Sheng was greatly alarmed and hurried to see the king. The king held Du Sheng's hand and wept, saying, "I have burdened you. Although my daughter and you are a good match, an unexpected catastrophe is descending upon us. The fate of the nation is at stake, and I don't know what to do. All I can do is weep." Du Sheng was deeply moved by the king's words and asked him to explain the situation. The king handed Du Sheng a memorial on the table. The memorial read, "The Grand Academician Hai Yi of the Huanchang Hall appeals for an urgent change of the capital due to an extraordinary calamity caused by monsters. Since the 6th day of the 5th month, 1,000 jang long giant python has arrived, coiling itself outside the palace. It has devoured over 13,800 people within and outside the city. Everywhere it goes, palaces are reduced to ruins, and so on." Upon receiving this information, officials bravely ventured out and confirmed the existence of the monstrous python. Its head is as large as a mountain, and its eyes are like vast seas. When it raises its head, it swallows palaces and pavilions whole. When it stretches its body, it engulfs tall buildings and walls. Truly, a heinous evil of rare occurrence throughout history, and a calamity unseen for generations. The nation is on the brink of disaster. We beseech the king to relocate with his family and attendants to a safe place as soon as possible." After reading the memorial, Du Sheng turned pale. Soon, a palace maid rushed in to report, "The monster is here." Everyone cried out in grief, and the scene was filled with despair. In his panic, the king didn't know what to do, But he wept and told Du Shang, "My daughter has caused trouble for you." Du Shang, feeling helpless, rushed back to the chambers. He saw the princess, with her attendants, weeping bitterly. When she saw Du Shang enter, she tugged at his robes and said, "My husband, how should we handle this situation?" Seeing the princess like this, Du Shang felt overwhelming sorrow. He held the princess's wrist and thought carefully, saying, "My home is very poor. I'm ashamed to admit that I don't have a golden palace. We have only 3 thatched cottages. For now, let's hide there together. Will that suffice?" The princess, tears streaming down her face, said, "Given the urgency of the situation, what other choices do we have? We can only hope to leave as quickly as possible." Du Shang then helped the princess outside. Before long, they arrived at Du Shang's home. The princess said, "This is a safe place, much better than our country. But now that I'm here with you, who will take care of my parents? Please build another house for them, so that the entire nation can come." Hearing this, Du Shang was in a quandary. The princess wailed and said, "If you can't help in a time of crisis, what use are you?" Du Shang comforted the princess and walked into the inner room. The princess lay on the bed, crying inconsolably. Du Shang, feeling utterly helpless, held the princess's hand and pondered, saying, "My family is very poor, and I regret not having a golden palace. I've come here to tell you about my dream, so that I can gain some relief." The princess suddenly sat up and held Du Shang's hands, looking at him earnestly. She said, "I've been watching you for a long time. You have a pure heart and good intentions. Although you are poor, you are kind and compassionate. You are a good man." Du Shang was moved by her words and wiped away his tears, saying, "Princess, your words are comforting, but how can I solve the calamity that has befallen your country?" The princess smiled gently and said, "Actually, the catastrophe is not real. It's just a dream brought on by your emotions. The great king in the dream is my father, and the palace is the Gifu Palace. The monster is a manifestation of our country's troubles, but it's not real. It's just a reflection of the difficult times we are facing." Du Shang was taken aback, and the princess continued, "I am here to convey a message from the heavens. You have a noble heart and great potential. The dream is a test of your character. If you can face it with courage and determination, you will bring hope and prosperity to your nation." Du Shang was deeply moved by the princess's words, and he vowed to do his best to overcome the challenges in the dream. After this revelation, Du Shang woke up. The sunset's fading glow outside the window signaled the end of the dream. He sat there, reflecting on the vivid dream he had just experienced. In the aftermath, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and reverence for the mystical realm he had visited.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.